Dubai draws more electricity at 9 in the evening than at any other hour of the day. But at 9 in the evening, the largest solar park in the region is producing nothing at all, and the people who paid for it are asleep or at dinner with the lights on. It is dark out there. The panels are cooling in the desert, and the meters read 0. Everything lit on the skyline at that hour is being produced and billed by something else, and that something else is the subject of this video. At first, this might just seem like the obvious limitation of solar power, and it is exactly that. The interesting part is not that the sun sets. It is what Dubai has had to keep standing by for the hours after it does, and how the way the achievement is counted keeps that standby fleet out of the headline. In 2025, the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority reported peak power demand of 11.39 gigawatts, up 5.83% on the year before, and its customer base passed 1,327,182 accounts. In the same year, the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum solar park reached 3,860 megawatts of installed capacity. Those two figures get printed next to each other constantly, and they do not measure the same thing. If you have ever sat in a room in the Gulf in August, when the air conditioning cuts out, you know how fast it climbs. 10 minutes, and the walls are giving the heat back at you. Every family, in every one of those 1.3 million accounts, is that room, and the room does not care what the capacity figure says. So let us walk through one summer day in Dubai, hour by hour, and put the published numbers where they land. 1 point first, because it decides how much weight the rest of this can carry. The authority publishes annual and quarterly figures, but no public hour-by-hour load curve, so every quantity here is an annual or quarterly figure from a published report, while the shape of the day comes from the physics of solar output and the known behavior of Gulf demand, rather than from an hourly dataset. Where I do arithmetic on published numbers, I will say that it is mine. 5:50 in the morning, late August. The sun clears the horizon southeast of the solar park, and the first rows begin producing within minutes, climbing quickly because there is almost no cloud to slow it down. The park deserves describing properly, because the scale of what those engineers built is real. It started in 2013 as a 13-megawatt pilot on empty ground. Phase 2 added 200 megawatts in 2017. Phase 3 arrived in 3 pieces, 200 megawatts in 2018, 300 in 2019, and 300 in 2020. And Phase 5 added 300 megawatts in 2021. Phase 4, finished in 2023, is solar thermal rather than photovoltaic, roughly 700 megawatts of mirrors, focused on a central tower filled with molten salt. Phase 6 added 600 megawatts in 2025. That is a 14-year construction program on one site, and it took a national utility from almost no renewable generation to 3,860 megawatts. It is one of the largest single-site solar developments anywhere on Earth, and the contractors and operators who built it delivered what they were asked to deliver. The site covers tens of square kilometers of gravel plain on the road toward Al Qudra, and on a working morning, it holds security staff, maintenance contractors, control room operators, and cleaning crews across phases built a decade apart. Capital investment by the authority ran to 11.72 billion dirhams in 2025, and much of that money is in the ground out here. None of that money bought a single kilowatt-hour for the evening, and nobody involved ever claimed it did. The park was procured to displace daytime fuel, and on that measure, it has paid for itself in fuel not burned between sunrise and sunset. The confusion begins later, when the capacity figure is quoted as though it covered the whole day. This channel exists to take the number in the press release and follow it until it turns into somebody's bill. If that is what you are here for, subscribe now, because the next hour of this day is where the capacity number and the energy number stop agreeing with each other. 8 in the morning. Offices open, workers arrive, and demand rises with them. Solar output is climbing at the same time, and for the next several hours the two curves move together in the same direction. This is the part of the day the solar park was built for, and across those hours it does the job it was built to do. 12:30. Solar output reaches its highest point of the day. If every panel is clean and the sky is clear, The park is delivering close to its rated figure, and this is the only hour in 24 where the phrase 3,860 megawatts means what most people would assume it means. Even here there is a subtraction, and it is mechanical rather than financial. Panels in a desert lose output to soiling because dust settles on glass and blocks light, and in this climate it settles fast. So there are crews out on the rows with brushes and deionized water, working a rotation that never finishes, and their schedule is a line in the operating budget. A technician on that crew will tell you that the expensive part of a solar park is not the panels. It is keeping the panels doing what the datasheet promised on the day they were installed. Put a price on that. Cleaning a desert solar park is a recurring operating cost paid every year for the life of the asset, and it is paid by the same customers whose bills fund the plant. The press release counts the megawatts once, on the day the phase is switched on. The workers with the brushes are paid every month for the next 25 years to stop that number quietly shrinking. Nobody writes a headline about the second figure, and it is the one that never stops. 4 in the afternoon. Surface temperatures peak, and so does the cooling load across the city, while solar output has already started to fall, because the sun is dropping toward the horizon, and the angle of incidence is getting worse by the minute. From here the two curves separate, and they will not meet again until the following morning. 6:52 in the evening, sunset, and output falls to zero over roughly 20 minutes. Now watch what a city of residents does. Offices are closing, but the workers leaving them are going home. And going home in a Gulf summer means turning residential cooling up. Restaurants fill. Shopping centers reach their busiest hour of trading. Towers switch on their exterior lighting, and every one of those loads lands on somebody's bill. Demand climbs through the evening and reaches its highest point of the day somewhere around 9. The solar park contributes nothing to that hour. Not a reduced amount. Nothing. So what carries it? The authority reported total installed generation capacity of 17,979 megawatts as at the middle of 2026, of which the Jebel Ali and Al Awir plants account for 11,519 megawatts. Those are gas plants, and their operators run them all year. Set that against the 2025 peak of 11.39 gigawatts, and the arithmetic becomes uncomfortable in a specific way, because the gas fleet on its own is large enough to carry the entire peak of the city without help. Put that in something you can picture. 11,500 megawatts of gas plant is not a reserve tucked away in a cupboard. It is 2 large industrial sites at Jebel Ali and Al Awir, staffed on shift every hour of every day, with turbines that have to be kept warm, fuel contracts signed years ahead, and maintenance crews paid to keep those machines available for evenings that may never need them. The customers pay for that availability whether the turbines run or not. It is the largest item on a Dubai electricity bill that never appears in a press release. There is a person whose entire job is this gap, and he is sitting in a control room rather than standing on a rooftop. A load dispatcher watches demand rise through the afternoon and schedules the gas units that will cover the evening for him. He commits those units hours in advance, because a large thermal unit cannot be taken from cold to full output in minutes, and the engineers on shift at the plant need that warning to do it safely. So somebody has to decide, in the early afternoon, while the solar park is at full output and every number on his screen looks excellent, exactly how much gas he wants spinning at 9 o'clock. That decision is the reason the fleet exists, and he and his colleagues repeat it every single day of the year. One caution about that comparison, because it is mine rather than an official statement. It compares nameplate figures rather than what actually ran on any given evening. But nameplate is the measure everyone reaches for when the solar number is quoted, so it has to be applied to both sides or to neither. This is the gap the whole video is about. Clean capacity is 3,860 megawatts out of 17,979, which is 21.5% of the installed total. In 2025, clean sources delivered 10.10 terawatt hours out of the 62.21 terawatt hours generated, which the authority itself reports as 16.23% of generation. 21.5% of the machines, 16% of the electricity, The difference between those two figures is paid for by the people holding 1,327,182 accounts, and it is not itemized on any of their bills. That difference is not an error, and it is not underperformance by anybody. It is what happens when a fifth of your capacity is only available while the sun is above the horizon, in a city whose busiest hour falls after it has set. The energy number is the honest one, it is the smaller one, and it is almost never the one on the poster. Now the money, because the achievement and the cost usually live in separate press releases. In 2025, the authority reported revenue of 32.84 billion dirhams, up 6.02%, and profit after tax of 9.09 billion dirhams, up 25.66%, on capital investment of 11.72 billion dirhams. In the first half of 2026, profit reached 3.33 billion dirhams, up 15.02%, on revenue of 14.86 billion dirhams, up only 1.8%. Read those two 2026 lines together and hold them there. Revenue up 1.8%, profit up 15%. That is a business selling roughly the same quantity of electricity at a better margin, and somebody is paying that margin. It is not the solar park. The customer count tells you who. At the end of 2025, the authority served 1,327,182 accounts, an increase of 4.48%, with 56,897 new accounts added in that year alone. In the second quarter of 2026, it added another 18,220, and the year-on-year increase reached 72,718 accounts, up 5.63%. Every one of those accounts is a home, a shop, or an office with people inside it. Almost all of them have cooling, and almost all of them use that cooling hardest in the hours when the solar park is dark. The 27,000 homes handed over across Dubai in a single recent quarter did not arrive with generation of their own. Their owners and tenants arrived as evening load. So the load grows fastest in exactly the hours the clean fleet cannot reach. That is the whole mechanism, and everything that follows is a response to it. The obvious answer is storage, and it is being built. The seventh phase of the solar park pairs 2,000 megawatts of photovoltaic capacity with a battery system rated at 1,400 megawatts and 8,400 megawatt hours, which is roughly 6 hours at its own rated power. It is one of the largest solar and storage projects under construction anywhere, and it is a genuine engineering answer rather than a public relations one. Now size it against the city rather than against itself. Divide 8,400 megawatt hours by the 2025 peak of 11.39 gigawatts, and you get about 44 minutes. That division is mine, and it is deliberately crude, because no operator runs a battery flat into a whole city, and this one is built to shave a peak rather than replace a fleet. But it puts the number into a frame a resident can hold. The largest battery in the program holds under an hour of the whole city at full stretch. Storage at this scale changes the shape of the evening for the dispatcher and for the engineers on shift at the gas plants. It does not remove the fleet that sits behind them, and it does not change what those operators are asked to do at 9 o'clock. The targets are public and specific, which is more than most utilities offer the people who pay for them. The authority expects total capacity above 23 gigawatts by the end of 2030, with 8.3 gigawatts of it renewable, or 36.1% of the mix. The Dubai Supreme Council of Energy has set 100% clean energy by 2050 under the Dubai Clean Energy Strategy, and the solar park is planned to pass 8,000 megawatts, with phases contracted to independent power producers including Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company. 36% of capacity by 2030 is a real commitment with real money behind it, and the engineers building it are not the problem here. But if the pattern from 2025 holds, the share of delivered electricity will land below the share of installed capacity, for exactly the same reason it does today. Nothing in any target changes the hour at which the sun goes down. There is one more thing loading that evening hour, and it is the part of a Dubai electricity bill most residents never see itemized. Large districts in Dubai are not cooled by units hanging off each apartment. They are cooled by district cooling plants that chill water centrally and pipe it to whole neighborhoods, and the resident pays a consumption charge plus a capacity charge that runs whether the apartment is occupied or not. Those plants are electrical loads, and they are large ones. Their heaviest work happens when the buildings they serve are full and the outside air is still holding the day's heat, which is to say, the evening. So the growth in accounts and the growth in evening load are not two separate stories. A tower handed over in June adds several hundred families to the account list, and a proportional share of a chiller plant that draws its hardest after sunset. The connection is not optional, and no household can opt out of it. Engineers and planners have 4 ways to meet that evening, and each one has a price attached. The first is to keep the gas fleet and run it harder in the evening. That works today, and it is what is happening, and it is why 11,519 megawatts of thermal plant is still on the books in 2026. The second is storage, which is the Phase 7 battery. It shifts solar energy by hours rather than creating any, and at 8,400 megawatt hours, it is large in absolute terms, and small against a peak of 11.39 gigawatts. The third is to move the demand instead of the supply, through time-of-use pricing that makes evening electricity cost the customer more. That works by charging residents to change when they cook and cool, which is a political decision as much as an engineering one. The fourth is interconnection, drawing on neighboring grids at peak. That helps only when the neighbors are not peaking too, and in the Gulf in August they are. None of the 4 is a trick, and none of them is free. Together they are what the evening actually costs, and every year, 72,718 more accounts join the queue for it. Here is where the evidence stops, and it stops a long way short of a collapse story. The authority does not publish an hourly load curve, so nobody outside that control room can say how much gas actually ran at 9 on any given evening. The 44-minute figure and the comparison between the gas fleet and the peak are my own arithmetic on published nameplate numbers, not operational data. Clean generation grew 52.38% in 2025, a rate most utilities cannot match, and the direction of travel is not in dispute. The battery capacity contracted for Phase 7 has not been commissioned yet, and I could not find a published figure for annual soiling losses at the park, which is the one number that would let anyone check the maintenance argument properly. If you work there, and that number exists in public, post it, and I will pin it here. What can be said is narrower. Clean capacity is 21.5% of the fleet, and clean energy was 16.23% of generation in 2025. The same ratio in the second quarter of 2026 was 3.14 terawatt-hours of clean generation out of 15.78, or 19.9%. Peak demand falls at 9 in the evening and rose 5.83% in a single year. The gas fleet at Jebel Ali and Al Awir is 11,519 megawatts against a peak of 11.39 gigawatts. Accounts grew by 72,718 in a year. Those 4 lines sit together and describe a system, not a failure. The system works like this. Dubai built one of the largest solar developments in the world, and it delivers during the day. The city it serves does its heaviest work after dark. So the solar park does not replace the gas fleet. It reduces how hard that fleet has to run between sunrise and sunset, and every year the evening it hands back gets slightly heavier, because another 72,718 accounts joined it. That is not hypocrisy, and it is not failure. It is what an energy transition looks like from the inside, where the demand curve and the sun curve point in opposite directions for the hours that matter most. The last thing worth saying is about the word capacity, because that single word is doing most of the damage. Capacity is what a machine could produce under ideal conditions. Energy is what it did produce. Every headline about the solar park uses the first one. The bill on a resident's kitchen table is measured in the second, and so is the price the utility pays for fuel. 3 in the morning. The park is silent and dark, 20 minutes out of the city by road, and there is nothing out there worth photographing. In Jebel Ali, the turbines are still turning, and the shift engineers are still on duty, paid for a night that 1.3 million account holders will never see on a bill. Between now and sunrise, everything Dubai is doing is running on those workers and those machines. This video is analysis of published operating and financial data and is not financial, investment, or policy advice. The full source list with reporting periods is in the pinned comment. If you work in generation, transmission, or district cooling anywhere in the Gulf, tell me what the real evening ramp looks like from where you sit, and I will pin the best answer I get. Which leaves the question the capacity figure was never built to answer. If almost every new account joins the grid in the hours the sun is already down, what exactly is the clean share measuring?